Okay, so we're in 1 Corinthians chapter 6. We're about halfway through it. And so just, if you're not sick of it yet, if you take the book and you break it in half, first half is chapters 1 through 6. And what's the main topic of that? Chloe's report. Okay, what Chloe had written to them about. And then you go from chapters 7 through chapter 16, and that's going to deal with, a letter from the Corinthian brethren themselves. Okay, so chapters 1 through 4 have to do with division, and we're done with that section at this point. Then chapter 5 through 6 deal with immorality. Yeah, exactly. Okay, now we'll stop there for now because really we're going to get into chapter 7 here pretty quick. But this section really finishes off, as we finish chapter 6, we're finishing off really dealing with immediate problems. I guess that'd be the way to put it. The division in the church, the man who had his father's wife that we dealt with in chapter 5, the immorality in the church and the legal issues where they were taking each other to court, those sorts of things. Paul's point on that section is that this is an immediate issue. This has got to be dealt with right now. This isn't a doctrinal problem we need to work through over the long term. Does that make sense? There's some things where we say, well, let's talk about that. Let's kind of work people through these. And then there's other things where you say, well, somebody's caught in that. It's just real quick. It needs to be handled now. We just need to stop. And so this first section is that dealing with those kind of immediate things, which is what gives that tone of the letter that Paul writes, that harshness to it that he was so worried about, right? Because if he took these 6 chapters out, you would still have some big problems to deal with. Don't get me wrong. We're going to deal with some things getting into the spiritual gifts and worship and whatnot that are some big deals. But if you took these 6 chapters out, you would have, there'd be a lot more room for him to be patient with them. You see what I mean? But in these 6 chapters, you got that real we have to hammer on this. And so chapter 6 here, he's been finishing up dealing with that fact that they were taking each other to court and arguing and cheating each other and all sorts of various things like that. And so in verse 9 he says, "Do you not know that the unrighteous will not inherit the kingdom of God? Do not be deceived. Neither fornicators, nor idolaters, nor adulterers, nor homosexuals, nor sodomites, nor thieves, nor covetous, nor drunkards, nor revilers, nor extortioners will inherit the kingdom of God." And so here he deals with this, and he's going to deal with this in multiple books. He's going to deal with this book in his letter to the Galatians. He's going to deal with this book when he writes to the Romans, which is when you become a Christian, you go down to that water and you come out with zero sin, right? And just as simple as that. You have zero sin when you come out of that water. So now you're forgiven of sin. And Christ has told you, I'll continue to cleanse you of that sin. In other words, that's not the only time you'll ever be forgiven, right? You get forgiven through your whole course of your life. So he says, I'll continue to forgive you. I'll forgive you for the next sin and the next sin and the next sin and the next sin. Well, one of the problems that comes in with this teaching is, well then if I can be forgiven over and over and over and over and over again, and truth is, how many times will Christ forgive you? See, there's no number on that, right? It's an open-ended thing. It's a blank check. He said, I'll just forgive you 70 times 7, as many times as you need it. Somebody could easily take that, especially some immature somebody like the Corinthians, and say, okay, do I need to really worry about living a sinless life? No. Because every time I sin, what's Christ going to do for me? He's going to forgive it. So I don't need to really worry about it anymore. See, okay, I've got no problems anymore. Christ has taken care of my sin. Christ has forgiven me of everything, and He will continue to forgive me of everything. And if I said that in the pulpit, that'd be correct, right? If I said Christ has forgiven you of everything and He'll continue to forgive you of everything, yeah, that'd be accurate. So somebody gets that in their head, and they're going to twist that to mean it doesn't matter whether I live a godly life or not. And so this is where Paul says, do you not know that the unrighteous will not inherit the kingdom of God? Do not be deceived. Now, whenever you say do not be deceived, you're saying that because you're afraid somebody's out there trying to deceive, right? And so you go in, it'd be like if you're going to go in and talk to an insurance salesman. And so you talk to your friends and talk to your neighbors, talk to your relatives and say, okay, what should I do? What kind of insurance should I buy? And one of your relatives says, now that insurance salesman, he's going to want you to buy the deluxe Rolls Royce insurance, isn't he? Do not be deceived. In other words, you don't need to buy the bells and whistles plan. And they're saying it because they know you're in an environment when you're in there talking to that insurance salesman where he's going to try and upsell and try and get you to buy more than what you need. That's Paul's point here is. He's not saying anything about forgiveness. Will Christ forgive you if you sin? Yes. He's saying don't be deceived if somebody tells you you don't need to worry about whether you sin or not. That's where deception comes in. And he's going to deal with this problem his whole life because the Gentiles are going to take this and they're going to, in their immaturity, use Christ's forgiveness as an opportunity to just sin and do whatever they please. And so he's going to deal with it with the Corinthians. And then the Jews are going to use this as an argument that Jesus isn't really the Christ and that Paul's a false teacher. Because they're going to say, see, Paul, you just tell people sin as much as you like. Don't worry about it. Which, of course, is appalling to a Jewish mind, right? You think about how carefully and piously Jews lived and how careful they were about what they said, what they ate, everything. And then, they would take this argument and say, Paul, you're just a false teacher. You're against Moses. So he's going to deal with this argument from both sides. So his point to them is, be not deceived. And then he lists a whole bunch of different sins. But I want you to notice how he lists the sins. Let me put it this way. He doesn't say, do not be deceived, neither someone who fornicates, nor someone who has committed idolatry, nor someone who has committed adultery. He doesn't say the act, does he? He says this kind of a person. The kind of a person who's an idolater. That's their life. If I say, Scott, I'm going to become an idolatrous man. I'm going to go out and worship Buddha. Or I'm going to go out and I'm going to set up an idol in my backyard, and every day I'm going to go out to that idol and I'm going to worship it. Now, I'm an idolatrous man. I'm an idolater, correct? But the Bible also says that if you covet something, that's idolatry, right? So covetousness, which is idolatry. Paul says that. So, okay, over here, I set up an idol in my backyard, and every day at 6 o'clock I go out and bow before it, and so, oh, hail, idol. Then I'm an idolater. But then you have another guy over here, and he sees a boat, and he really, really likes that boat, and he gets fixated on that boat, and he starts thinking about that, and that boat becomes so important to him that he finds a way to buy it even though it's not in his family's best interest. Now the rest of the time, that's not the kind of person he is, but that boat just got him. Now that guy, did he commit idolatry? Is he an idolater like me? Well, you see, but there's difference. See, yeah, he's committed idolatry, but it's not a lifestyle, is it? It's a difference. We'd say this there's a difference between somebody who lies. How many of us have lied? Oh, I've lied, right? Now, do you think of yourself as a liar, though? No, there's a difference between the two, right? One is a lifestyle choice, right? And there are some people who live that way. They can't even help themselves from lying. That's just, they've chosen to live a lifestyle of lying. And it's just part of everyday life. They don't try and change it. They're not trying to fix it. It's just part of who they are. They're not fighting it. We make a distinction in normal life between those two, right? There are people that you say, that guy is a mean person. And then over here you have your best friend who's been mean before, but you don't think of them as a mean person, right? It's not part of their character. Now what Paul's addressing here is character. Now here, you Corinthians, if you start getting in your mind that I can sin as much as I want and I'll be forgiven of it, and so you pick up a lifestyle of sin, you become a homosexual, you become an idolater, and you're over at Zeus's temple every Thursday. You become an extortioner, and you make your money off of scaring people and extorting money from them at huge, immense interest rates and cheating them. There's a big difference between that lifestyle and somebody who sins but didn't mean to, right? So one is a lifestyle choice, the liar, and the other is oops, I didn't mean to and I'm not going to do it again, which is the lie. Does that make sense? There is a difference between those two. Paul's addressing you Corinthians, if you think you can be a liar, if you think you can have a lifestyle of this and get to heaven, yeah, don't be deceived. That makes sense? Because his point in this is that's what they've been doing. They've been cheating each other, they've been suing one another, they've been just arguing and bickering and fighting, and they say, oh, but I'll be forgiven of it. Don't worry about it. Do not be deceived. If that's the lifestyle you choose, there's a big difference. There's a huge difference between somebody who's trying to do the right thing and they slip up. That would encompass all of us, right? Every single one of us is trying to do what God says, and we make mistakes. And I didn't mean to do that. And you pray for forgiveness and you say, I'm gonna fix it this time. I'm gonna be better this time. And you kick yourself and you get back up and you try it again. Proverbs says that a righteous man falls down 7 times, but he's going to get back up again. And so that kind of person's one thing. If you have somebody who's trying to be faithful, how many times will God forgive him? Without limit, right? Just innumerable. But you have somebody over here who says, I'm going to do as I please, and they pick a lifestyle of sin. How many of those sins is God going to forgive? Not even a single one. So do not be deceived. Those who are extortioners, those who are homosexuals, those who are effeminate, those who are and thieves, covetous. Now, really, you look at that and you go down that list, and there's all sorts of things in there. Maybe not every single one of them applies to you, but you can at least find some of those. You go, oh yeah, I've done something that was theft, or I've done something, I got drunk one time, or I was an extortioner. Or you could find something in there that you did, but there's a difference between doing it and it's my life. And so Paul's point here is don't think that you can live a lifestyle of sin and still be okay. Now, I spent a lot of time making that distinction because here's where we get mental problems as Christians. And we do. We really kick ourselves and get ourselves to where we have this mental dilemma and live in anguish. Is you look at these verses where it's condemning these sinful lifestyles, and you look down there and you go, ooh, covetous, nor covetous. Oh, I've coveted something once. Maybe I won't go to heaven. Now, we do this. We do something wrong, and we sin. And you do the wrong thing. You just admit it. I was covetous. I shouldn't have been covetous, and I was. I got jealous, or I stole that thing, or I cheated on my taxes, or whatever it is. And you admit it, and you go, oh, I did it. And so then you look over at that verse, and you go, there's no way I'll inherit the kingdom of God. There's no way I'm going to go to heaven. There's no way I'm really a part of the church. And you get this mental game you play with yourself where you say, I'm not good enough to go to heaven. Now, if I use those verses that way, now I've got another problem, don't I? Because how many of us are good enough to go to heaven? No, none of us are. So I want you to understand, verses like that where he's condemning, he's saying this kind of lifestyle, that if you live a lifestyle of this and you just say, I'm going to do it regardless, There's a big, big difference in the eyes of God between somebody living that lifestyle and somebody saying, no, I'm trying to get out of that way of living. I'm trying to be a different kind of a man. I'm trying to be a different kind of a woman and live for God. And when that's what you're trying to do, even if you fall down, he says, you get back up, God will forgive you. Any questions on that? Now look in verse 11, that really proves the point. He says, and such were some of you. Every single one of those sins up there were sins that had been committed by people in the Corinthian church. Now this is one of those ones that I like to use when people start talking about homosexuality and they say you're born a homosexual and you have no choice in the way that you live. Well, verse 11 says that that's not true, doesn't it? There were people living a homosexual lifestyle, and Paul says they heard the gospel, and what'd they do? They stopped it, right? I mean, when it says such were some of you, that's past tense. That means this is the way it was, but it's not now. And so every single one of those things means I can get out of that. Now that makes perfect sense for a thief. People go, well, thief, yeah, sure, I just stopped stealing stuff. Well, does that mean, if I was a thief, I want you to imagine for a second, I was a thief and anytime I wanted something, I just stole it. The second I say, I'm not going to steal anymore, and I walk into a grocery store, are there going to still be some things that I want to steal? Yeah, I'm going to have to probably put my hands in my pocket. You know what I mean? Because I've got this habit of just giving myself that 5-finger discount. Anytime I've got a problem, every time, oh, I'd like that, and I just take it. So how do I stop being a thief? I stop taking it. Doesn't mean there's not a mental issue there. See, one of the things with homosexuals is they'll say, I can't stop wanting. I mean, it's kind of sickening that I have to cover this sort of thing, but this is the world we live in today. And if you haven't heard this argument or run into somebody and talked with somebody about it yet, you probably will. They'll say, but I can't, I just like men. Or I just like women. I can't change it any more than you can change it.